Welcome back, Defenders. The headlines from the last 2 days have been very interesting. I'm going to get you caught up. But I think Ukraine has a pretty good plan. Ukraine's allies set an ultimatum to Russia for a 30-day ceasefire. Macron, Starmer, Merz, and Tusk arrive in Ukraine for a coalition of the willing meeting. 4 European leaders arrived in Kyiv on May 10th to discuss security guarantees for Ukraine amid renewed calls for a ceasefire with Russia. There's the photograph. This event was planned weeks in advance and kept in secret. The reason why is PR, to dominate the headlines, to get in the news. Vladimir Putin dominated the news on May 9th. He had over 20 world leaders attend his Victory Day parade. So the democratic world, this is their response, to have these 4 European leaders come to Kyiv on May 10th. And there's the photograph. Kind of looks like the Beatles or Reservoir Dogs. Here's what President Zelensky has to say. Together in Kyiv at the meeting of the Coalition of the Willing, 5 of us in person, joined online by leaders from over 30 countries, the EU and NATO. We discussed what is urgently needed to achieve peace. Let's not forget the ceremony. Whenever world leaders greet each other, it's interesting, the ceremonial procedure. So to get the feel, this is the arrival of the French president, and this is how Ukraine's government greeted him.
It's very good to see you, General. General.
Mr. President.
Thank you so much.
This is a much smaller red carpet than Putin and Xi when they met each other. And let me read for you what some of these world leaders are saying. We're going to start with the French president. This is what he stated at the joint press conference. We have just decided, all of us here today, with the 20 or so member countries of the Coalition of the Willing, to support a ceasefire that will begin next Monday, with no preconditions to this ceasefire, either on the part of the Ukrainians or on the part of the Russians, which is intended to last 30 days on the ground, in the air and at sea, with monitoring provided mainly by the United States of America, and to which all willing European countries will contribute. It will enable immediate management of the work and negotiations between the parties involved to build this robust and lasting peace on the question of territories, the question of sensitive energy infrastructure, and of course the question of security guarantees. In the event of a ceasefire violation, we agree that massive sanctions will be prepared and coordinated between the Europeans and the Americans. This is what French President Macron is saying. I have spoken several times last night with President Donald Trump. This coalition is trying to force on Russia a 30-day ceasefire to engage in peace talks. If Russia rejects the ceasefire, allegedly Donald Trump has agreed, according to the French president, to increase sanctions on Russia. Here's the Prime Minister of UK. I don't have to read this one, and this is what he's saying.
So we are clear. All 5 leaders here, all the leaders on the meeting we just had with the Coalition of the Willing, an unconditional ceasefire, rejecting Putin's conditions, and clear that if he turns his back on peace, we will respond. Working with President Trump, with all our partners, we will ramp up sanctions and increase our military aid for Ukraine's defense to pressure Russia back to the table.
That is the Prime Minister of the UK once again saying he's working with Donald Trump. If Vladimir Putin rejects Donald Trump's demand for a 30-day ceasefire, then the Europeans and the Americans will increase sanctions on Russia. This is the gambit. This is what we're trying to accomplish here. Zelensky and European leaders offer Russia a 30-day ceasefire in call with Trump. Trump's on the phone. That is Donald Trump right here in the meeting with these European leaders, everyone agreeing if Russia does not immediately accept a 30-day ceasefire to engage in peace talks, then sanctions will be increased. Trump calls for a 30-day unconditional truce in Ukraine, threatens new sanctions on Russia if they don't do it. This is what Trump has been saying for weeks. So what's the response? Putin rejects 30-day ceasefire, proposes direct talks on Ukraine capitulation. Of course, the Russians said no. This was a very odd press conference. This happened at like 1 or 2 a.m. in the morning because Putin didn't see this coming. He had to draft a response in order to not agree to a ceasefire and somehow convince Trump he's not avoiding a ceasefire and is still on the path to peace. So here is what Putin said in his bizarre press conference last night. Despite everything, we offer the Kyiv authorities to resume the negotiations interrupted by them at the end of 2022. To resume direct negotiations, and I emphasize, without any preconditions. So the Ukrainians want a 30-day ceasefire without preconditions, and the Russians want direct talks without preconditions, but these cancel each other out. We propose to start without delay next Thursday, May 15th in Istanbul, where they were held earlier and where they were interrupted. So Russia wants to resume direct peace talks with Ukraine in Turkey starting on Thursday. The message from Putin tonight is that he rejects the 30-day ceasefire proposed by Trump in Europe and accepted already by Ukraine, but is willing to have his men meet Ukrainians in Istanbul to negotiate the terms of Kyiv's capitulation. Reading this as a step towards peace is beyond naive. Who would be naive enough? Who would be dumb enough to believe that Putin's statements are genuine and he actually wants to stop this war? President Putin of Russia doesn't want to have a ceasefire agreement with Ukraine, but rather wants to meet on Thursday in Turkey to negotiate a possible end to the bloodbath. Ukraine should agree to this immediately. At least they will be able to determine whether or not a deal is possible. It's not possible! And if it is not, European leaders and the United States will know where everything stands and can proceed accordingly. I'm starting to doubt that Ukraine will make a deal with Putin, who's too busy celebrating the victory of World War II, which could not have been won, not even close, without the United States. Have the meeting now. President Zelensky to Trump will talk to Putin, but make him commit to a ceasefire. We await a full and lasting ceasefire starting from tomorrow to provide the necessary basis for diplomacy. There is no point in prolonging the killings. And I will be waiting for Putin in Turkey on Thursday. Personally, I hope that this time the Russians will not look for excuses. So Putin called Trump's bluff. Trump doesn't actually want to increase sanctions on Russia. Putin knows that, so he said, we're not going to do a ceasefire, but we can have direct talks again. Zelensky then called Putin's bluff and said, I will meet you personally in Turkey on Thursday. We can settle this like men. And there's no way in hell that Putin is going to go to Turkey in person. Putin is going to send Lavrov. He's going to send his delegation. Zelensky is going to show up in Istanbul in person and say, where are you, Putin? Do you actually want to stop this war? Do you actually want peace? This is a delay tactic. This is stupid. Ukraine downs 60 drones in Russian overnight attack. Russia every night is still committing acts of terrorism, deliberately targeting civilian infrastructure. Putin is buying time in Ukraine while planning to strike from 3 sides simultaneously. The front lines have been very quiet the last couple months. There's not been a lot of major offensives because Putin has been conserving strength, building up his forces, maybe in the Sumy or Chernihiv areas, for something big to happen soon. Putin wanted to get through the May 9th Victory Day parade, and now that we're past that, Putin's going to roll the dice. He's going to make some plays on the battlefield that will be disastrous for the Russians, but high risk, high reward, they think. We don't know what's going to happen, guys, but Putin has something planned, and he sure as hell doesn't want to agree to a ceasefire. Putin is openly calling what he thinks is Trump's bluff. The White House demanded an unconditional ceasefire, or there would be arms to Ukraine and greater sanctions on Russia. Putin responds with more delays and bullshit. So, is America all bark and no bite? Russia calls the tune? Garry Kasparov doesn't hold back, guys. I love this guy. Trump rushes to abandon his own and Europe's ceasefire deadline, which Ukraine already agreed to embrace Putin's latest bullshit and pressure Ukraine into worthless negotiations. The brief posturing was a sham then, and Trump is still on Russia's side. Trump is desperate to do anything other than to apply pressure on the Russians. But Zelensky's not going to give him a choice. I think Zelensky is going to show up in Turkey on Thursday and say, I will only talk to Vladimir Putin directly. I will only engage in peace talks if Putin himself comes to Istanbul, which Putin's not going to do. This week is going to be interesting. I think these clips coming from Zelensky on Thursday are going to be pretty wild. Trump promised to end two wars quickly. In private, he admits he's frustrated. This is from the Wall Street Journal, and Trump's an idiot. And he does like Vladimir Putin, and he does like the Russians, and he doesn't want to be mean to them. Trump doesn't care about war crimes. Trump doesn't care about people dying. Trump only cares about his reputation and his prestige, enriching himself, and he wants to be friends with Putin. He wants to be allied with the Russians. And the Russians are telling him no. We already got the Chinese. We already got the North Koreans. We already got the Iranians. Why would Russia ever want to ally itself with the United States? This is so stupid. U.S. Embassy warns of threats of Russian attacks in the coming days. U.S. Embassy put out this alert warning saying that there's going to be some kind of attack in Ukraine. And anytime the State Department has issued a warning such as this to Americans in Ukraine, they've been correct 100% of the time. U.S. intelligence coming out of Russia is pretty damn good. So what potentially is coming in the next couple days? Russia may close airspace over Kapustin Yar, site of the Orshnik ballistic missile launch scheduled for May 12th or 13th. This is the theory. Putin wants to, once again, saber-rattle Russia's nuclear arsenal, and he's probably going to test launch another Orshnik ballistic missile on a Ukrainian city. Now, Russia already did this last November. They launched their Orshnik from the Caspian and struck the city of Dnipro. The damage was minimal because there was no warhead. There was no nuke or conventional explosives. It was to send a message. And apparently, 6 months later, Putin wants to launch another Orshnik against maybe Kharkiv or Zaporizhia or even the capital city of Kyiv. This potentially might happen this week. And is Putin really going to do this a day before Zelensky goes to Istanbul to have peace talks? Like, these headlines are insane, guys. Russia doesn't want to stop the war. Russia doesn't want peace. They want to expand the war. They want to conquer more. of the European continent, the Caucasus, and Central Asia. Russian Children's Army is now larger than the US Army and combined armies of the EU countries. Russia's youth military program, UNARMIA, this is the Putin Youth Army, now consists of 1.8 million children, including hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians from the occupied territories. Indoctrinated by Russian propaganda, they may become future soldiers in various conflicts. It is a war crime. It is against the Geneva Conventions to militarize children. If you're 14 years old, you're a civilian. You can't be a soldier. And right now, there are 1.8 million Russian and Ukrainian children in the Putin Youth Army, being indoctrinated and prepared for decades of future wars against Finland, the Baltics, Poland, Armenia, Turkey, Kazakhstan, Mongolia, whoever. Putin's going for it all. And the Russian people are not resisting. They are not pushing back. Putin's youth army is bigger than the US Army. Putin's youth army is bigger than the combined armies of the European Union. So no, I don't think Russia's going to agree to a ceasefire. And another reason, I think, obviously Putin wants to expand the wars and he wants more territory and resources for himself. But I also think he doesn't want any of these soldiers returning home. He wants to keep them in the war zone until they're expended or captured. I don't know. I don't know how this war ever ends and Russian soldiers are allowed to go home. 10, 20, 30 years from now, who knows? But this video, in my opinion, illustrates a serious risk if there is a ceasefire. If the guns go silent and there's no more meat assaults, there's no more drone attacks, Russian soldiers are going to want to go home. They're going to want to visit their families. They're going to want time off from the war. And after 30 days is up, they might refuse to go back to meat assaults and fighting on the front lines. So here is the story of Anastasia Zerzia, and she is a mother of 4 from Stary Oskol. This is inside Russia. This is a local news report about what happened when her husband came home from the war zone. I'll just read the subtitles for you. Anastasia Zerzia is an orphan and mother of 4 from Stary Oskol. Anastasia, tell us your story. We'll come inside and you can show us everything and explain what happened. On October 29th, 2024, our house burned down. It was set on fire by my own husband, who at the time was a SMO participant. When he came home on leave due to an injury, he was under the influence of drugs. He had a gun and a machete. We were scared. I took the kids and we went to the city center. Half an hour later, neighbors called me and said the house was on fire. The house doesn't belong to me, it belongs to my 4 children. There's no criminal case, no crime was officially committed. So you didn't receive any compensation at all? No, since it wasn't considered a crime anymore. All right, let's show that the entire house burned down. Let's walk through the rooms. You have 4 children, right? Yes, 4. How old are they, and are they boys or girls? 2 sons, ages 18 and 14, and 2 daughters, 7 and 3.5. This hero of Russia came home on leave, addicted to drugs, fighting with his family. He then burned down his own house. Could you imagine if hundreds of thousands of these messed up Russian soldiers returned home from Ukraine to their local cities in Russia? Putin's never going to allow this. And then there's the North Koreans. Ukraine is now fighting a war against Russia and North Korea combined. Kim Jong Un says North Korea's involvement in Russia's war, part of a sacred mission. The first couple months, the North Koreans were not publicly admitting what they were doing. They weren't telling their own people. But I guess enough time has passed and Kim Jong Un likes the attention. He likes being included. He likes feeling important, and that's how Putin makes him feel. So Kim Jong Un is making public statements now saying, our involvement in the war was justifiable, and this belongs to our sovereign rights. I regard this as part of the sacred mission we must execute for our brothers and comrades in arms. Here is the latest clip from Russian Media Monitor, and this is Marina Kim. I'm guessing she is a Russian citizen of North Korean ancestry, and she has been documenting North Korean units on the front lines. I don't think any of this video has been released yet, but Solyov decided to have her on his show. And this is how she describes the North Koreans fighting for the Russians on the front lines. So this is her own description of the North Korean soldiers. They are 18 to 20 years old. They are very young. Their bodies are in shape. They run 10 to 20 kilometers every day. They are amazingly motivated. You can send them to space or anywhere else. I saw their balance beam exercises and obstacle courses. They are the embodiment of a warrior. Passed down through decades or maybe even centuries, this is a warrior that demonstrates incredible discipline and an incredible motivation. These soldiers fearlessly go towards the machine guns. They pay no attention to the shelling. Now they are acquiring the experience and allow themselves to hide, to conceal themselves, as required by modern warfare with drones. But they are absolutely fearless. We can't forget that according to their code, they can't surrender. What this means is when their platoon is surrounded, they say over the radio that they are pinned down, that they can't make it out. They don't ask for an evacuation. They don't even have a term for this. They just take a grenade, and this is it. This is Russian state TV bragging that their 18-year-old North Korean slaves commit suicide on the battlefield better than any other military in the world. Full clip down below if you want to hear more. Ukraine's drones haunt every road to the front, but Russia keeps sending men to die. In Ukraine's 25-kilometer kill zone, nothing moves unseen, and few make it through. I don't really talk about map changes or map updates because the Russians aren't making progress. They're still attacking every day. They're still taking horrendous casualties. But they're not advancing. And the difference is FPV drones, surveillance drones. And here's a clip. There's no bodies, nobody's injured. Everyone's okay in the clip. But this is what the battlefield now sounds like. This is a recording from a Russian soldier, and you can hear how many drones are in the sky. That's a no for me. We have to find a way to make Russia stop this war. This week's going to be interesting. Let's cover some other headlines. Romanian far-right leader Simeon demands Ukraine repay aid and opposes further aid. Romania donated a Patriot air defense system to Ukraine, and this guy who wants to be Romania's new president is demanding that Ukraine pay Romania back. This is exactly what Donald Trump said and did. Protests in Romania as fears of pro-Russian candidate grow. Amid the specter of Moscow's influence leading to a pro-Russian candidate victorious in the upcoming election runoff, Romanians take to the street to show their support for the European Union. The runoff election is on May 18th in Romania. The pro-Russian candidate got 40% of the first round of the vote, so hopefully my friends in Romania step up and find a way to defeat this guy. But let me share with you this protest from the capital city of Bucharest last night. I hope all these people show up to vote. Total Marxists like Pope Francis, MAGA furious as Pope Leo's critical posts on Trump and Vance resurface after his Vatican vote. I don't think it's a coincidence that, given the disruption to the democratic and free world caused by Donald Trump, that the Vatican deliberately chose an American pope. Nobody on their bingo boards was predicting that this guy was going to be selected. There were several other cardinals who were more prominent and more well-known. But the rumor is that this was Pope Francis's hand-picked selector, and he did it because of the rise of Trumpism. Trump's harsh policies towards the poor and immigrants especially, as well as his authoritarian tendencies. So this new pope, he's from Chicago. He's American. He speaks English, Italian, and Spanish. And this clip, he's speaking Italian, but I'll read the subtitles. And he gave an interview, and he made it very clear where he stands on the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. This is an extremely serious issue that affects the entire world. There are many analyses of the war that Ukraine is going through at the moment. But from my point of view, it's a clear case of imperialist invasion. Russia is trying to conquer territory for reasons of power and for its own benefits. Given Ukraine's strategic location, as well as its immense cultural, historical, and economic value to Russia. And what's happening, well, it's already been proven, is that crimes against humanity are being committed in Ukraine. Yes. We must pray to God for peace, but I also believe that we must speak more clearly. Even some politicians in our country refuse to acknowledge the horrors of this war and the evil. He's talking about J.D. Vance, who is Catholic, and Donald Trump, who is now president. To acknowledge the horrors of this war and the evil that Russia is perpetrating through its actions in Ukraine. I like this new pope, guys. I really like him. Let's get to the good news for Ukraine. UK to sanction 100 Russian oil tankers in biggest ever shadow fleet crackdown. Thank you so much, the UK. Germany to halt public reports on arms sent to Ukraine. Chancellor Merz refused to confirm or deny if Taurus missiles would be transferred to Kyiv, citing the shift towards discretion in military aid. I think this is good news that Germany no longer wants to announce what they're sending to Ukraine. So if they do send Taurus cruise missiles, I think Trump actually has to give his approval for that. Then they'll just start being fired. Russia won't be given advance warning. According to the New York Times, the United States approves the German transfer of 125 Gimler's rockets as well as 100 Patriot missiles. This is good news because Trump does have the power to block the transfer of American-made weapons, but because these Patriot missiles are defensive and Russia keeps attacking civilian cities, this was an easy approval. We're going to need more. We're getting there. Final video I want to play for you is the leaders of these 5 countries paying their respects to fallen heroes. I'm going to play this video in its entirety. Keep fighting, keep resisting. Russia will be defeated. That's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel. Comments and questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, keep defending the truth, keep defending democracy.